Vinnie Moore. How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Hell yeah. Where you coming to us from right now?
I am in St. Petersburg, Florida today
Okay, what are you doing there?
from a hotel. Just a little bit of vacation.
What are your plans?
No plan. That's the beauty. Just hit the beach and chill out, and whatever happens, happens.
That's the way to do it. Before we really get into it, though, I have to say I'm going to apologize. At the moment, I am getting over a cold, which is, one thing. But I also, last night, chipped about half of my back molar off. So if at any point my voice is definitely not at tip-top shape at the moment. So I want to preface that, because if there are some times if I'm like, son of a bitch, it's because...
Just don't spit a tooth at me and you're okay.
Well, we're going to see what happens, because I got, basically it broke where the jagged part of it is stuck into my lip or my cheek, basically. So
you need some super glue, man.
Honestly, for how much it's going to cost to fix it, I should probably just do that and go with it.
I had the exact same thing happen recently, but just the tip of one of the crowns, and my dentist put it back on. He's like, I don't know, you might get a week out of it. You might get 6 months. And so far it's been like a year and a half. So,
hey, that's pretty good. I'm getting it fixed on Monday, but for the meantime, my whole job here is to speak, and I'm getting hit with a double whammy of things that make it harder for me to speak.
Yeah, you have some cough drops.
Exactly. But I want to ask, so you're originally from Delaware, right?
Delaware, yes.
What's a childhood in Delaware like? Were you in a small town, in a city? What was your childhood like?
Yeah, it was a small town, right, pretty close to the Delaware River. Just grew up with lots of friends playing baseball and football, all the pretty standard stuff, actually.
What'd your parents do?
Small town childhood.
What'd your parents do when you were growing up?
They weren't married, so I lived with my mom, and she had jobs with credit card companies. My dad was actually a mailman for a while.
Okay. So
worked for the post office.
So when you were young, before you got, because you were like what, around age 12, right, when you started getting into guitar?
Yeah, I got my first guitar at age 12 for Christmas, and I took my first lesson the following February.
Did your parents have any, before you got the guitar, was there any inclination like, hey, maybe you might be interested in being a musician? How is it that exactly, did you ask for a guitar, or is it just someone in your family, a guitarist? How did that work out?
I asked for a guitar for Christmas because I really couldn't figure out what I wanted, and it was getting late in the game. And my mom was like, you really have to decide on something, because I don't know what to get you. So I went through a J.C. Penney catalog, and I paged through it, and I saw a guitar with a little amp, and I went, hey, I want to do that. And I have no idea why. I guess it was the coolest thing in the catalog. And so I told her that's what I wanted, there was a lot of feedback from family members going, oh, it takes years to play those things. He'll never stick with that, blah, blah, blah. But I ended up getting it. And, the rest is history. I got obsessed with it like a little bit at a time until I was totally obsessed.
So when you first got it, what were you doing? Were you just kind of playing casually, or you're like, I'm going to get really good at this?
Oh, I wanted to get good, but, I didn't know anything. I started taking lessons and just learning the name of the notes in the first position, and then learning basic chords. And, that's pretty much how it all started out, like a year of that, reading music and learning to read.
Was there anything else around that age where you're like, if this guitar, didn't become your main obsession, was anything that you were particularly good at that you think you could have seen yourself going down as maybe as a career later on?
Not really. I was like, before that, I played Little League Baseball, and I loved baseball. And of course, every kid dreams of being a professional baseball player. And that was pretty good, but I definitely didn't have the size, nowhere near did I have the size. And I was really good. But then, the first preseason game of the senior league, I broke my ankle, and I was wearing a cast. I had just started playing guitar at that point. And I was like, okay, baseball's over. I'm just going to get into this guitar thing, and just kind of grew from there.
What was your first band? How old were you when you got in your first band?
My first band was, I've been playing like 6 months. So I guess I was like 13 or 14. And it was a group of guys that were 2 or 3 years older than me. And I found out about the band from a mutual friend. And they were really, way more advanced than me. And the guitar player, whose name was actually Glenn Miller, believe it or not. And he taught me a lot of things. At that point, I knew bar chords, but I didn't really know any songs or anything. And he taught me a lot of the songs they were doing, and I learned a lot from him. And there wasn't really many ways to learn songs back then. Like now, my son has been playing for a couple of years, and he just goes on YouTube and he's playing all these new things. Because there's people doing instructional teaching videos, which is really cool. But back then, we just took lessons and we got together with friends and kind of traded information that way.
So then, what kind of music were you playing in that first band? Was it original at all, or was it all cover music? And
No,
what kind of
no,
music
it's
was
like
it?
all the popular music of the day, which now would be called classic rock. It was Bad Company, Foreigner, geez, other things like that. And there was a song by the Babies, and just all your standard stuff.
What was the name of that band?
Oh God, I didn't make this up, so don't blame me. The band was called Game, and it was spelled GAIM.
GA.
And
I like that.
we did like one gig in somebody's backyard at a party, and we mainly did a lot of rehearsing in the drummer's back room of his house. That's pretty much the extent of our career.
So, and when did you really start taking guitar seriously? Was it from that first band? Was it like, oh, I'm just doing this now? Or was there a specific point after that that really hit you? You're like, I'm going to really take this seriously now.
It happened gradually, but it was kind of a steep slope. I just got more and more drawn in. And I'd say by the time I had been playing a year and a half, man, I decided I would practice 2 hours a day, which I wasn't forcing myself to do it. I just loved playing. From there, it eventually grew into 4 hours a day, and then 6 and 8 and even more. And I just became fanatical about it, man. And I was into so many different styles of music, different bands. And I just thought, wow, I'd love to be able to do this. I love doing it.
What was the main stuff? I know you said you were into a bunch of music, but what was the main stuff that you were listening to around that time? Was it basically like classic rock stuff? Was that your main interest?
Well, I grew up on things like the Beatles and all the other, typical stuff that was on the radio. I loved Motown because there were so many great songs. And I think the first record I actually bought was Led Zeppelin 4, the Stairway to Heaven one. My mom had a copy of Machine Head by Deep Purple. So I was a big fan of that record. I would buy Beatles records. I really got into Queen. So it was, and yeah, all those bands. And then Jeff Beck came soon after that. So the beginning was
That's a
Deep
really good
Purple,
mix.
Queen, Zeppelin, Beatles, Jeff Beck, all those guys.
So when did you start writing your own music?
Um, you know, I started writing because my teacher was teaching me scales,
Uh-huh.
and I didn't want to just sit there all day and go do 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 do. So I would take some chords, and he was teaching me theory too, so I knew how to put chords together, that were related in the key, and I would just make up like little progressions. They could be two chords, it could be a three-chord progression, and then I would always have a change, because you just can't do the same two or three chords over and over for 5 minutes. So I would always make a change, different chords, and then come back to the main part and just kind of loop those two parts back and forth. And then I would practice the scales. And, it got to the point where that became like the beginning of my songwriting thing, inadvertently. I was just kind of trying to get better with my playing and the music theory and the scales. And, I started putting chords together, and that kind of became, the first part of my songwriting.
Were you able to notate it at all, or were you just doing this all off memory? You like come up with a song and
No,
just
I
store it?
just memory, and I would improvise over top of it. And I'd lay a chord progression down on a little cheap tape recorder, and then I'd add another one, and come up with another one, and gradually it became like 40 or 45 minutes worth of music that I was just jamming over top of every day.
Did you
Just to learn improv, basically.
Now, did you find a group around that time when you first started writing that you were able to perform this music live with?
Not really. I eventually got into another band, but we were doing covers. We did a set of Van Halen, a set of Zeppelin, and then the other two sets. We were playing clubs, wherever, whatever was popular at the time. And it was hard. You couldn't do really, your own music, original stuff at these clubs. They wanted to hear cover tunes.
Hmm.
And that's kind of why I eventually quit the band because I got more and more into writing. And I thought, I don't want to play in a cover band forever. I want to write my own music, come up with my own stuff. And so I bought this 4-track recorder. It was a cassette recorder, the old Tascam 238, I think it was called.
Uh-huh.
And I just started like working on writing songs and play, creating melodies over chords. And yeah, that's kind of the transition into how I became like,
And
an original
you ended up
artist.
using that recorder to make a demo that you ended up sending to Guitar Magazine, right?
Yeah, guitar player into Mike Varney for he wrote a column called Spotlight for New Talent, and he'd feature like three, younger or whatever unknown guys from all over the world, actually, not just over the country. And he featured me in the January '85 issue, and things kind of took off really well from there.
So when you were making this demo, was it specifically like I'm going to make this for this entry, or did you just have it and go, "Oh, this is perfect. This works perfect for
Yeah,
this
I made it
column."
specifically to send to him. And my first attempt failed. I went into a studio with a drummer, and it just didn't come out. It was more like 2 hours one evening, and I got the tapes and I listened. And I thought I was really like unhappy and depressed about it because it wasn't really that good. So I thought, man, I got to find another way to do this. And that's when I bought the 4-track recorder, learned how to record, and hone my skills. And the demo that I sent to him eventually came from those 4-track recordings.
How old were you when you did that?
Oh man, I think I was like maybe 19.
Okay, so around college age.
Yeah, maybe 20.
So what did you end up doing? Did you end up going to college, or out of high school did you just go straight into working as a musician?
I went to college for 1 year for electronics, and just my heart wasn't there. It's like, man,
Why'd you pick
and
electronics?
in a lot of ways, but I just wanted to play music, and I thought, I got really lucky that I went down that path, and it worked out for me.
So wait, why'd you pick electronics originally to go to college for?
Well, I went to a trade school in high school. It was like for electronics. I actually went to half a day at this one trade school and half a day at regular school. And at the trade school, I took electronics. So for 3 years. So
So
it was a natural,
you're
thing to
bas-
go into college and take that too.
you're basically spending your days getting this education, but you're not really focused on it. You're like, I'm a guitarist at heart at this point. This is just because I'm
Exactly.
supposed to.
Yeah. And the electronic thing got really intense, man, because there was a lot of theory and stuff and very mathematical. And you really had to devote a lot of time to it. And I just didn't have it in me to devote that much time to it. And so it was like fall back on guitar and hope for the best.
So now, what was the point? You said it was a year in. What was the thing that pushed you over the cliff that made you say, "I can't do this anymore. I need to pursue what I'm
Well,
really into"?
basically, I finished the first year and never went back to the second one.
That's the
And I
way to
remember
do
my
it.
grandmother going, "Oh, are you crazy? What are you going to do? You need to get a job." And luckily, I didn't kind of bum around for too long. I made things happen, and I got lucky, and it worked out. I was very fortunate.
Right when you first left, what was your first job as a guitarist getting out of college? Was that how you're making money? You were straight into just doing gigs and paying your bills that way?
Well, it's really weird. I did that. I was in that Spotlight column in Guitar Player magazine, and from that, I ended up getting a Pepsi television commercial because there was a production company in Los Angeles. They were casting for the part. They were having trouble finding somebody, and they bought some guitar magazines at a music store, and they were paging through, and they saw me, and they read the review, which was it was a good write up, and picture wasn't even that great, so I don't know why it interested them, but they got a hold of Mike, who wrote the column. I got a call one evening, like at 6 o'clock, and I was literally on a plane the next morning to go to LA. I had never even been on a plane before, and I ended up getting the part. I mean, originally I was supposed to act in the commercial too, but I didn't get that part, but I got the music part, luckily.
I wanted
But
to.
my hands were shown in the commercial, and so for a while there, I would joke that this hand, they're really famous.
Yeah, I was gonna ask about it because I was like, I noticed when I watched the commercial, I was like, that's not Vinny, but does this actor just happen to know how to do it? I was assuming it was your hands, but I was like, it seems like a whole big runaround to not just have you play the whole part. I don't know how these commercials work. They're confusing.
Right. Yeah, it would have been great if I got the acting part, but I think, I was really young and kind of shy, and I had no camera experience. And small town boy goes to LA, and I was kind of intimidated and, just basically afraid. And, had it happened a couple of years later after I had a lot more stage experience, being on tour and stuff, I think I would have gotten the part. But yeah, I just wasn't quite ready for it yet.
I originally, in honor of you, wanted to dress up as the guy from that commercial because I have that same shirt, but I realized I don't have the jeans. I was like, I can do it. He's like, because he wears like that red button up with the wife beater and these big jeans. And I wanted to wear that because I thought that would be so much fun, but I don't have the jeans. I thought that was really what sold it. And I can't show a Pepsi bottle because I don't know how that works with the logos on YouTube and stuff like that.
Exactly. Oh, that's a cool idea. I might steal it from you.
I want.
Hey, here's what it would have been like if I was in there.
Well, I was like, I wanted to, because I can't play the guitar, but I was like, if I can dress up as the guy,
Hmm.
it's my way of pretending that I can play the guitar like that. It's my Vinnie Moore, almost like my Halloween costume. You know what I mean?
Gotcha. Yep.
So then, when did you start prepping for your debut record?
I went out after the commercial. I went to San Francisco, Santa Rosa, actually, California, north of San Francisco. And Mike Varney, who wrote the column on me, also had his own record label called Shrapnel. And he hooked me up with his band called Vicious Rumors. And they needed a guitar player, and he wanted to get me on a record, so he invited me out to play with the band, and I ended up playing on that record. And so that was the next thing. And it was people still mention that record. A lot of people really like it. It was really cool. But I think in the 4 months I was out there working on the record with them, we kind of like we're growing apart stylistically.
Mm.
Like I think Jeff kind of wanted to go more in like a heavy thrash direction, with a more screaming vocals, and like that just wasn't what I was into. And so I decided, but I thought it would be better for me to, go back home. Plus, I was really young and homesick. That had a lot to do with it. I just wanted to get home and, kind of rethink things and regroup and recalculate. And I originally wanted to do a vocal record, like a solo, find a singer and form a band. And Mike came to me and said, "Hey, what if you did an instrumental record? Your instrumental songs in the demo are really good. People are seem to be interested in that stuff again. You could go down that route and just maybe do one instrumental record and kind of make some waves and kind of take it from there and start the vocal band." And yeah, I was really reluctant. I didn't want to do that, actually. And the more I started to think about it, I realized it was a really good idea. So I started writing songs for the Mind's Eye record. I went back to Santa Rosa, Nevada, California, Prairie Sun Recording Studio to record it with Tommy Aldridge, Andy West, and Tony McAlpine. And the record came out, and man, it did really well, like beyond my wildest expectations. It did really, really good. And so then I almost had to do another instrumental album to follow it up, because it would have been kind of crazy to not follow up, a successful formula, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And then the record after that was supposed to be a vocal thing again. And I wrote a bunch of vocal songs with a singer, and the singer just kind of at the last minute flaked out. And so I started writing more instrumental songs and did the Meltdown record.
Okay, gotcha. How long was the writing period for each of those albums? Were they all basically the same length, or was any of those records more difficult than the other to write?
Man, I don't know. With writing, it's either feast or famine. It's like you could sit
Yeah.
around with a guitar for a week and you can't come up with anything. You start thinking too much and trying to different ideas, different drum grooves, different chord progressions, and you're just not inspired, and there's nothing there. And then you could just be sitting around playing for 10 minutes, and like all of a sudden, this idea kind of presents itself that's really inspiring, and you really feel it. And then for me, once that happens, the floodgates open, and I get related ideas, and that's kind of how a song, ideas become a song. Once the floodgates open for me, I almost get too many ideas, and I can get those ideas playing guitar, or I can just hear things in my head. Either way, and then I just record them, and then I have to kind of get rid of some of the unnecessary stuff, or the weaker stuff, and just figure out what's the strongest and organize it. And I think all my records probably take about the same amount of time to write.
Uh-huh.
And basically, that's the amount of time you have. You'll spend like as much time as you have to write a record. It's crazy. If you have 10 years, you go, okay,
You need
I'll
you
have
need
it
like
done
a
in 10
deadline.
years. It's sometimes you need a deadline. Yeah, exactly. And to be rushed, but not too rushed, because I don't perform well if I'm like feeling rushed. But yeah, I mean, it takes me months. It's not like usually. Sometimes I write like a song a week. Sometimes I might write a song in 15 minutes. But in general, I would say one a week.
Now, when Mind's Eye came out, obviously, like you said, it was very successful. Was that right off the bat, like release day, immediately it was like, oh, this is selling way more than, we expected, or did it kind of have a slow curve to that?
I think it happened not like totally immediately, but fairly immediately. There was a buzz about it. I don't know why. I went to the NAMM show in when was it, 87 in January, and the record hadn't come out, but I was there endorsing Ibanez guitars, and they had a big, huge poster of me on their on the wall, and
That must have been
it just kind of
crazy.
created this like whole buzz. Like seem to be aware of it around the NAMM show. And then Ibanez ran a bunch of full page ads in like Guitar Player, Guitar World, Guitar for the Practicing Musician, all those magazines. So, the album probably would have sold well even if it was crappy, because my image was kind of everywhere, in the guitar community there in the magazines
What
for a
was
while.
what was your first big purchase when you got your check off that record? Was there any crazy spending right when it took off?
No, not really. Maybe gear, I'm always obsessed with gear, but I was like not paying for guitars at that point, because I, you know, had an endorsement with Ibanez, and then I ended up with Lady Amps. So yeah, I didn't go crazy. I'm not that kind of guy. I'm more of, you know, keep this for the future, because who knows how long this stuff's going to last.
That's a smart way to do it, because the reason I asked, because I was talking a couple weeks ago, or not even, it's like it's 2 months by now. Time goes by so fast. I was talking to Kevin Godley, and he was talking about how before 10cc, I can't remember the name of the song, but he had come out with this song, and I mean, the way he put it was, he was like, it sucked. It was utter trash, terrible, but it
Uh-huh.
sold really well. And he told me that he went and bought, what was it? I can't remember the model. It was some ridiculously expensive car. And he was like, we thought we'd write another song. And then we wrote another song and we lost all our money. And my car melted in the
Uh-huh.
heat. And so now I'm curious about like when those first, things
Right.
take off, what people's first inclination is. But
It
I'm
was
I'm like
total
you.
rubbish. You
Yeah.
said it was rubbish,
He,
right? It was rubbish.
it was something. I mean, he might have said it more vulgarly, to be honest. I don't remember. He was basically, every song that he talked about was, he's like, yeah, every song that did well sucked. It was shit. I can't do his accent very well, but
Man,
he's,
I love some of their stuff, man. They wrote some amazing stuff.
yeah,
Lots of experimenting too.
when it was him and Lol Cream before 10cc and before, because they were like a house band for Strawberry Studios.
Hmm.
Before, and that's how they formed 10cc. But before that point, they were just writing songs, as I can't remember. They had some goofy names, like a duo. But before it was Godley and Cream, obviously, and they wrote a couple
Hmm.
songs. And apparently, the first one took off, wasted all of his money, as he'll say it. I'm not vibing him. That's
Right.
how he will put it. And then they did that
And we
second
thought,
song.
oh, we've got to write crap from now on, and we'll do well.
Exactly. But yeah, I'm more like you though when it comes to that, where I'm like, I'm not really interested in if I ever get a big check from this show, I'm not trying to buy a Lamborghini or anything like that. I'm more straight ahead. So you basically, once you made that money off that first record, your thought was, I'm not about to go live crazy. I just want to follow this up. I want to write, the next album, which ends up being Time Odyssey. I'm just
Hmm.
living normal. Was there any stress? Were you thinking like, was the magic that I captured with Mind's Eye, is that something that I can do again if I try to recreate it? Or is it like if I go for that same vibe, am I going to be able to continue it, or was there any thought I should go for something totally different just because I don't know if I can live up to that first record if
Right.
I'm writing in that same vein?
There was a little pressure like that. How can I, do something as good as the first record? But to be honest, like with every record, I felt like that. How am I going to come up with like 10 songs that are any good? Can I do this? You always kind of tend to like think like, where's it going to come from? What if I'm not inspired? So with me, there's always kind of that worry, and the more you think about it, the worse it becomes. And I've gotten better at over the years. I don't think about that much anymore. But I remember back in those days, like, yeah, like, what do I do next? And, with every record before I started writing, I was like, what do I do? Where do I go? Am I going to be inspired? How do I make a great record? And there's always the worry that, maybe you can't.
Yeah.
But luckily, if you just kind of stay with it and focus and get on the schedule, it happens.
How long after the release of Mind's Eye did you start working on Time Odyssey? Did you take any time off at all, or is it right into it?
It had to be within like 6 months because Time Odyssey came out in '88. It
Yeah.
was finished in January of '88, and Mind's Eye came out, yeah, like a year before in '87.
Yeah.
Not even a year before. So yeah, there wasn't a whole lot of time.
Do you remember how much at all, if any, or is it literally like that same week, basically, I'm going in and writing
No,
already?
no. I mean, there was probably a couple months at least.
Gotcha. Now, what are you working on in that couple months? Are you just thinking about what the next record is going to be? Or are you kind of letting yourself chill out and
I
just kind of
was,
let the stuff come naturally?
as I said, I was endorsing Ivan as guitars at the time, and I was just out on the road doing guitar clinics like all over the country and over the world, which
So
is a
that was
really
taking up.
great thing.
Yeah.
That really helped my career for sure.
Okay.
And so, yeah, that's basically what I was doing.
And then, so who called you after that and got you hooked up with Alice Cooper?
Um, by the way, after Time Odyssey, that's when I bought the house.
Hell yeah. That's
So
the
I
way to
guess,
do it.
right.
Once you're like,
But,
I got a little more, I'm feeling more comfortable. I know what I can do. That's the way to do it.
yeah, but don't buy one that's like way more than you can afford. Buy one where you can put at least half down on it. And, if times get rough, you're still in good shape. So that was my approach. But anyway, so I was in the studio working on the Meltdown record in Millbrook, New York. And I believe I got a call from my manager saying that Alice was doing a new record and he was having all these different guitar players guest on it, like Slash, Satriani, Vi, and Mick Mars, and would I be interested in doing a solo? And it's like, hell yeah, of course. So I think I guess it was after I mixed the Meltdown record. I drove up to Bearsville, New York, to Bearsville Studios. Alice was there, and I laid down a couple tracks. I did solos and rhythms for 2 songs, and the whole band wasn't there, just him and Steph Burns, the other guitar player. And I spent a day there recording those songs, and maybe 6 hours, and then we all like went out to dinner, and I drove home. It was like a 4 hour drive for me. So it was like a wham bam, thank you, ma'am kind of thing, in and out. But I never expected that I would be asked to be in the band. I just thought I was guesting on the record. And I said, like maybe a month or two later, I got another call from my manager saying they'd like you to do the tour. And like at first, it was like, wow, man, my new record's coming out, and there's all this like positivity going on with a record label. Everybody seems to really like it. And you're going to do a solo tour for at least 6 months, maybe a year. All this positive things were being said, and I was really excited about doing that. So when I got this offer, it was like, well, hey, what about my record coming out? And it's like, at first, Alice was going to, we were going to do this Operation Rock and Roll tour, which we did. And I was with Motorhead and Judas Priest, Dangerous Toys, and Metal Church. And my manager was like, "You're crazy. You know, Alice is on the same label as you. You're going to meet all these record company people all over the country. It's going to be so beneficial. And then after that tour, he's going to go back and hit America again, which will be even double great for you." But so I joined the band. We do that first tour, Operation Rock and Roll. But, you know, as I said, the original plan was he was going to go back into America, but for some reason his management kind of changed the game plan. They decided to go to Europe for 6 months. Then all of a sudden the record company was saying, "Well, if you're going to be out of the country for 6 months, it doesn't really make much sense to put your record out. We'll just hold it for another 6 months." And the record had been finished in January of, what year was that? I can't even remember, man.
Because Meltdown ended up coming on,
91?
I think Meltdown ended up releasing in '91 too. Then
Right. It was finished in January of 91. And had I stayed with his band and gone to Europe, it would have been a whole year later, at least, before the record came out. And that just gnawed at me. And so I kind of decided to not go to Europe with him and just kind of follow my own path, you know, go on my own tour. And there was like talk of me opening up for Rush, which actually
yeah.
happened for 10 shows. And so, you know, I'll never know if I made the right call, but, you know, I just had to kind of follow my own path.
Well, about the Rush thing, was there any overlap of that discussion of opening for Rush while you were still deciding? Because I know you ended up going on the Roll the Bones tour in, I think it was like that was '91 still. Was there any discussion of that while you were making that decision with Alice, or is that after you had already decided, you know, I'm going to focus on my own stuff?
It might have been like mentioned as a possibility, and I didn't really think, you know, much of it because you hear about all kinds of things that might happen that never do pan out in the end. So that's just something you kind of get used to in the music business. So we went, the record came out. I put a band together with Brian Tishy, he's an amazing drummer, and JD, John DeServio from Black Label Society. And we went out for like 6 months. And I think like maybe like 3 months into the tour, we heard that we might get the Rush thing. And luckily, it actually happened, and which was amazing for me because I was such a huge Rush fan. And it was very cool thing.
Are you the kind of person who enjoys being on a tour like that, or do you prefer more to kind of be back home versus, you know, being on a bus, working every night in a different city? How do you adjust to that?
I like the tour thing, but not for extended periods of time. It can, you know, I don't know how these bands go out for like a year and a half, or a year and a half at a time. It's just a long time, man. I need to like stay grounded by being home some too, and just kind of having some normalcy. But I was really lucky because with UFO for the last 20 years, we'll go out for like 3, 4, 5 weeks max at a time, and, you know, kind of just do it in spurts and different runs like that. And for me, I like working like that. It's the best way.
You like having those? Like, what would you consider like a really like a long run? What's your maximum where you think that you kind of max out in terms of the enjoyment factor of a tour?
Well, honestly, it would depend on what I'm getting out of it. Like, you know, what kind of venues are we playing? How successful is it? How much money is being made? To be frank, you know, that's a part of it.
So a
And
big part of it.
yeah, you know, do I want to like spend 6 months away from home? And if I do, I got to be getting something. You know, I'm not like the 20-year-old kid anymore that's like, I'll just do anything, you know, just to further my career and whatever it takes.
So
You know, I'll go out for 3 years and like lose money. I don't care. You know, we've all been there.
so when
And my thinking is a little different right now. There has to be something that I'm getting back.
that makes sense. I like that a lot because some people I think
And
are
I mean, I
just
love the fans, just being on stage playing for the fans. I'm getting a lot from that. But, you know, sometimes it takes that and, you know, a little more too.
I mean, obviously, like it's with anything, you know, you kind of revert, even if something is new and amazing, after a while, you revert to kind of your baseline enjoyment of something. So you have to be
Hmm.
getting more than just, oh, it's a bigger audience, so I'm going to enjoy this more. There's so much more to it, you know?
Right. Some tours can be way more grueling than others. You know, you can be riding in a little van with long drives every day. And other tours, you're on a big, nice bus. You can sleep on the bus, so all depends on the specific scenario.
So then, was it the early 2000s when you joined UFO? Did they kind of talk to you about that idea? Like, hey, we want you to join, because I think you joined right before You Are Here came out. Did they talk about like, we want you to be in the band, but don't worry, we're not doing these long stints. It's kind of up and down, off and on, or is that just something that kind of happened once you joined?
We didn't really discuss it. It just kind of seemed to go that way. We first met in Germany, outside of Hanover, to do the record at the studio, and we didn't like tour first. I mean, I joined the band. We had worked on songs in advance and kind of traded them by CDs back in the day, sending CDs overseas. And when we had compiled enough material, we got together to just rehearse and hash out the ideas and make a record. So that was like the very first thing we did. And the tour came a few months after that.
Were you hesitant to jump back into a band? Because I think you just come out with Defying Gravity a couple years before you ended up joining them. Were you like, I just put out this record, maybe I'll take a little hiatus off and join a band? Was that any thought before they asked you, like, I could get into someone else's thing? Or were you really at that point just focused on still releasing your own music?
Well, I always wanted to release my own music, but I was always open. I always, as I said earlier, wanted to be in a band, with a vocalist and do that. So it ended up being a perfect opportunity. And they didn't want just a side man. They wanted a guy to be a full member of the band. Phil was looking for a guy who was a songwriter that he could collaborate with. That's what he had in the past with other guitar players, and that's what he wanted. So, he offered me a really good opportunity to come in and be an equal member, so it's very good.
And the rest is history, Vinny.
Yeah, I mean, I thought in the beginning maybe this will go like 5 years, max, and then like 10 years, 15. At some point, somebody said it was almost 20, and we hit like 20, and it's like, wow, where did all those years go? I never thought it would last that long, to be honest with you.
Was there ever a point where you thought about, like, maybe I'll take a break and just work on my own stuff again? Or was it just like, man, I'm loving this too much, I wouldn't even consider that at this point?
There was always a lot of downtime over the years with the band. We made, I don't know how many records we made, like maybe 5 or 6. And then we'd tour, and then there'd be time off, and there was always time off between tours. And, there was always enough time for me to write my own stuff and record records. So while in the band, I think I released 3 or 4 solo records, maybe.
So those down periods were extensive. They weren't just little bits at a time.
Say again?
Those down periods, they weren't just little bits of time. They were long enough where you were able to comfortably make your own music. Because I know you released albums.
Right. They were long enough for me to really get into it and be totally obsessed with it, and then have to leave and go over to Europe. Like, damn, I want to finish this. I know it was sometimes when you're really into something, and for me, it was really hard to pull myself away from it. Mm-hmm. But I kind of had to learn how to do that. You go away for like 3 or 4 weeks, and I'd come back and I'd try to go into my studio and start back up on it. And it would take like maybe a week or 10 days to kind of ease back into it. It didn't always like happen quickly or immediately. It always took time to get back into the groove. So,
yeah,
but luckily there was enough open time to where I could do my own stuff and juggle back and forth pretty easily, I'd say.
That's an amazing situation. It's a very fortunate place that you can find something where it's like you have your, quote unquote job, where it's something that I know I'm going to go and do this, but at the same time you have that time to go and focus on the stuff that you really, what got you into music in the first place.
Exactly. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Vinnie,
lucky to do both.
We hit our time. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. Before I let you go, is anything you want to say, anything you want to push, tell the audience?
Just want to say thanks, Scotty, for having me on. And I have a solo tour coming up.
Hell yeah.
In Europe in September.
What's the tour called?
It's just Double Exposure Tour. And I actually will have a singer with me for the first time with my solo band. I'm going to do all the instrumentals, but we're going to do some vocal stuff too with a guest vocalist.
Hell yeah. Well, thank you so much. I'll go and I'll find links to your website, anything about the tour. I'll put them in the description here so people can check it out. Thank you all for watching. We'll be live next Friday at Weird Time, 3 p.m. With Billy Cobham. Very excited. So I'll see you guys next time.
Awesome, man. Awesome.